Subscribe for more.
Michael said I couldn't come over for Christmas. This happened in December, on a night that was frigid. I went after giving a smile and a nod. Even though what he said hurt my feelings, I took sure to keep my face neutral. I made a quick phone call before getting into my automobile. Before the new year, I would have been sure that they had paid down their mortgage. There was a lot more to come, but it didn't come until later. People were dealt with harshly for their arrogance, and this brought justice back to the world. Finally, after a lengthy wait, the appropriate time to do anything had come. I decided to do something to stop people from treating me like a doormat. As I drove away from their house, I felt comforted by the darkness that surrounded me. For many years, I had been in charge of taking care of them and making sure they lived comfortably. But what did I get out of doing that? I was still the person who was left out and only talked to when they wanted something. They decided that I wouldn't be welcome at Christmas anymore and that I wasn't important enough to be a part of their celebrations. I didn't want to say how much that hurt me. At this moment, all the love, sacrifices, and other things I had done for them didn't matter anymore. It was thought that everything was well. As I drove through the peaceful streets, the truck's motor made a soft humming sound, and the scenery that I knew from my area went past. I could see the house that I had helped Michael buy in the mirror of my rear view. It was full of all the stuff I had bought for him. The house was so full of things that they could possibly want that it looked like there was nothing or no one there. At that point, I had given them everything I owned. I was no longer a part of their life unless I was ready to pay for it. I didn't have to go to their Christmas dinner party. They didn't want me at their table, and I didn't have to cook their turkey in order to sit down with them. I should have thought more about what I needed to do next. Whenever they asked for help, I would give it to them and bail them out. I worked on this for 5 years. I have never missed sending money every month. Like clockwork, it's always been on time. I had taken out loans to make sure kids had the best of everything, and I had refinanced my home twice. Nobody ever thanked me for anything. It seemed like they couldn't see anything I did or gave up. The streets sped by me in a haze as I thought about everything I had left behind. I had put all of my time and money into thinking about how to make them happy. I felt lightheaded because of all the things I had done for them. They didn't even want to be near me this year for the holidays. They didn't want to invite their elderly father, who had worked hard to support them. The only things they were interested in were the ones I could provide them. I was quite angry and emotional. How can they be so rude to me by treating me this way? What kind of problem do they have? After everything I had done for them, they made me feel like my feelings didn't matter at all. Michael, my son, the boy I had raised and thought would be appreciative for the sacrifices I had made, had turned his back on me. It wasn't only about the money, it was also about the respect. I had been nothing more than a tool for their success, giving them an endless quantity of money. They left me as soon as I stopped being useful to them, which was when I refused to do what they wanted. As I rolled into the driveway of my home, I realized how bad the situation was. I wanted to purchase a house, and I worked hard and poured all of my energy into making that goal come true. But at this moment in time, it was a constant reminder of how bad I was. There was more wrong than just the mortgage. The house wasn't the only thing that was involved in the problem. It had everything. To make them happy, I gave up all the years of my life that I would never be able to get back. I sat in the truck for a long time and stared at the empty porch, thinking about how much I had given up and how little they had valued it. I could feel my phone buzzing in my pocket. Michael, there is no space for doubt at all. Most likely, he called to say he was sorry and try to fix their relationship with a few hollow promises. I waited, but no one got back to me. I kept sitting in the quiet and looking out the window instead. I wasn't sure what to do with the rage that was starting to build up inside of me. I felt like I had to scream or yell into the universe because it was so unfair. Even if people said I did, I didn't. I made sure to maintain my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road ahead of me. There would be no more screams that hurt your ears. In the future, people will not ask for respect anymore. It was time to take control of things. I was getting more and more aware of the anger that was building up inside of me. They took a lot from me. This is where I keep my money. I love you very much, even though I don't have much time to spend with you. Were taken without any serious thought. At this moment, I felt like I was the one who had been left out, as if I were just an afterthought. But still, it is how far it can be used. I didn't want to play their game anymore. I was sick of being the quiet giver, the person who always gave but never got anything back. I kept myself busy for the next few days by going over everything with a fine-tooth comb. Papers related to mortgages, bank statements, and payment receipts. I wanted to see all of it with nothing hidden from my view. I needed to know exactly how much money I had given. I needed to know exactly how much time I had spent helping them reach their goals while they made empty promises to me. I was very surprised by how big the amount was when I saw it. $400,000 just covered the interest on the mortgage payments, not anything else. That didn't take into account the times when I paid their power bills, fixed their car, or helped them with their emergency costs. I called them back and didn't miss a single one. I gave them all they asked for whenever they needed it. What would I get in return? Not a thing, not even a single sweet potato. It is impossible for anyone to say, thank you. The knowledge hit me all at once and knocked the wind out of me. I had given up a lot, but they didn't have anything to show for it. They thought it would always be there and never fail. At this point, they had already said no to me. They turned me down around Christmas, which was one of the many occasions they could have. People thought that the holidays would be all about love and family. They decided to leave me behind so they could start their new life. Isabella's family cared more about the well-being of their relatives than their own. I became obsessed with the idea and put it in my memory like nothing else. What could possibly make them not grateful? How could they possibly not see everything I've done for them? Why did I keep giving in to them and letting them take advantage of me after all this time? It is not the case anymore. This time, I was in charge instead of the other way around. I would help them realize what would happen as a result of what they had done. Once they decide I'm not worth the trouble anymore, I'll help them realize they've lost something. Over the next few days, I came up with a plan. If I were you, I would stop making payments. I would block the transfers that happen automatically. I would get back the control they had so easily taken from me. They were about to have to deal with the ramifications of what they had done because the moment of truth had come. After everything calmed down, they would be able to understand exactly what they had given up. As soon as I received all the paperwork I needed, I knew exactly what I had to do. Even though the method was simple, it would have a tremendous effect. I wouldn't be giving them any more of my own money. I wasn't going to be the one they called every time they needed aid. They were going to learn how important it is to never take anything for granted, and I was going to make sure they never forgot that lesson for the rest of their lives. During our phone conversation, I called the bank agent and made careful to keep my voice cool and steady. This month, the mortgage payments were not made. It was done. At this point, there was no need to even think about going back. The first step had already been taken because it had been done before. After that, everything else would be taken care of. I was able to get all the other things I needed, and the next several days went by in a haze. I made sure I had every piece of evidence, every record, and everything else that would prove how much money I had given. It was time to check and make sure they understood everything. To show them what their actions toward me have done. If I did it, I would figure out what would happen. I knew the time had come as Christmas Eve became closer and closer. I was ready for everything that could happen. I wasn't going to spend another Christmas alone, especially since I could make them face the truth. The plan, the evidence, and the solution were all already in place. They finally felt the weight of all the things I gave up this Christmas. As soon as I walked inside that house and showed them proof of their betrayal, they would know exactly how much they had lost. They couldn't change the outcome of the game anymore. It was one of my things. I leaned back on my kitchen chair. The room was quieter now that the mortgage payments were no longer due. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel bad. It felt peaceful and free. For a long time, I have been carrying a heavy burden that has been crushing my chest. But I don't have to worry about that anymore. All I have to do now is finish my plan. They took advantage of my kindness and treated me cruelly. Finally, they were going to have to pay for what they had done. They would feel the pain that came from the decisions they had made. I was going to make sure they never forgot about it. I couldn't stop thinking about how many years I had spent taking care of Michael and Isabella. 5 years of being the unseen power behind their lovely lives, a life I helped create but was never a part of, while making monthly payments on loans and refinances to keep them from feeling bad. I had never let myself feel that angry before, but the idea that they had treated me with such complete disrespect that they had left me as if I were useless made me feel that way. They didn't know that I could do things far better than they thought I could when I chose not to follow their orders anymore. I knew that the next step would be the most essential one in the whole process. The most important thing was to make sure they knew exactly what they had done and how they had done it. It wasn't only about the money, it was also about how they used me, how little regard they had for me, and how they turned me into their own ATM machine without even thinking about it. They haven't thanked me for anything I've done for them. But it would soon change in certain ways. I wanted to make sure that they knew just how much I had sacrificed, how much I had given up, and how little it meant to them. When I called to stop making payments on the mortgage, I had a few days of a busy mess. For several hours, I carefully went through receipts, bank statements, and mortgage-related papers. I carefully organized all the records I could find that showed how much I had given and how much I had lost. I went over every number and every detail again to make sure there were no mistakes at all. I had to show them that this wasn't just a mistake. It followed a pattern that never changed. A conscious decision to take everything I own without giving me anything in return. I threw away a manila folder that included proof of everything I had done for them, including papers that showed what I had done. It was like a mountain made of paper, with each sheet symbolizing a different part of my life that I had left behind. I was feeling both angry and hopeless as I flipped through the pages, and I couldn't control them. What had happened to make this the case? What made me give them so much of my time that I didn't even think about how it was affecting my health and happiness? I had been so busy making sure they were happy and taking care of them that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I was so focused on what I was doing that I couldn't pay attention to anything else. Still, it is the scope of its use. I made up my mind that I wasn't going to waste any more time feeling sorry for myself. I was going to stick to the strategy one had made. I knew what I had to do. I thought it was important to show them so that everyone would know what the truth was. They would never be able to see me the same way again after I had finished speaking. After I had finished speaking, they would never look at me the same way again. The next few days were spent working on research projects. I began to consider every possible consequence and every chance I could think of. I was aware that I needed to be careful. This was no longer only about getting revenge, it was also about making sure they knew what would happen if they did something wrong. It was really important for me to employ strategy. In this case, I wasn't going to allow my feelings get the best of me. I had planned to stick to the same plan. I wanted to win, and I wanted them to know that I was serious about it. Michael was the first person I talked to. I looked through his social media accounts to see if there was anything that could help me. I discovered a great deal. They sent messages with pictures from their holidays, stories about the costly dinners they had, and news about the new car they had just bought. Every letter reminded me that they had been taking advantage of my goodwill while pretending that everything was fine. Still, I knew that money wasn't the only thing that mattered. The issue was how they had treated both Maria and me. It was the way they had treated everything I had done for them with such little care, as well as the way they had fooled me into thinking that I was doing something useful for them. I had set a trap for them by using the love I felt for them, and they fell for it. I shifted my focus and started paying attention to Isabella instead. I looked through her Facebook timeline and postings to see if I could find something that would show who she was. It didn't take a lot of time. I just happened to uncover a picture of her standing in front of their new house, which I had helped them buy. I was working extremely hard just to get by, yet she was there with a huge smile on her face as if everything were going fine. I found more pictures as I was going through them. They told stories about their excursions and dinners. They were showing off what they thought was their perfect life and perfect environment in all of these pictures. A universe that I had gotten my hands on. A world built on the sacrifices I've made. They have never demonstrated their thanks by saying thank you. As I looked into the problem more, I found more and more evidence that they were lying. I bought all of it with my money and my hard work, expensive gifts, fashionable clothes, trips away from home, and a life of luxury. As I did more searches, my wrath rose. I didn't grant it permission to show itself, though. I decided that this had nothing to do with getting furious. This was connected to getting power or taking control. I had what I needed after a few days. I had the paperwork in my hands. I had the proof at the time. It was me that came up with the plan. Finally, it was time for him to start putting his plan into action. I understood that if I wanted to make the most difference, I would have to hit at just the perfect time. I didn't think it was okay for me to just come into someone else's house and throw papers all over the place. This was probably done on purpose. It was important to be exact. The post I read on Isabella's Facebook page was the best chance I had. They were having a Christmas dinner for a lot of their friends, including individuals who worked with Michael, people who were friends with Isabella, and those who didn't know what was going on. They were all going to come up at their place and act like everything was great and like they hadn't taken everything I had to give. I had the feeling that this was it. I had been looking forward to this moment for a long time. I would no longer let them hide behind the lies they had made up. I was going to tell everyone they knew about their secrets, and there was no way they could stop me. I made plans throughout the next few days. I made sure that all the papers were in order, that all the proof was gathered, and that everyone had enough copies. I was going to make sure they knew what was really going on. After they did that, they would never be able to look at me the same way again. There is no way they could ever say that I hadn't taken advantage of them or that I hadn't given them everything I had to offer without getting anything in return. I knew it was time because the day of the banquet had come. I put on my best suit, which I hadn't worn in a long time, and headed to their house. The gloomy sky and the fresh air were both excellent for my bad mood. As I got closer to the house, I observed that the Christmas lights on the windows were softly twinkling. The holiday season's warm and welcome warmth always made me feel at home. But it won't happen this time. This time, I was one of the people who weren't allowed to join. I wasn't going to let them keep pretending that everything was all right this time. I took a big breath, walked up to the door, and knocked. I knew that things would be different as soon as the door opened. There would be no more pretending from that point on. You won't be able to lie anymore. They would have a clear understanding of what they had given up and how things really were. The knock boomed through the stillness of the night. For a short time, I stood there, wondering what I was about to release out into the world. On the other hand, I was no longer plagued by doubt. The uncertainty had rapidly faded away, and in its place came a sense of determination that had been brewing within me for several months. As a parent who wanted affection, I wasn't going to their house. I was going as a man who had finally learned to value himself. Isabella came into view as she opened the door a moment later. The moment she saw me, her smile faded and her eyes narrowed in a suspicious way. "Dennis," she replied in a voice that was a little sharp. "I am an AI system that a group of Amazon inventors made." I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there and stared at her, letting the silence hang in the air. This was a moment she had never expected to have. I was no longer the parent who let others push me around. I was not the kind of man who would back down when she pushed me to the side. For the past 5 years, I have been the man who has supported her family financially and emotionally, and in return, I have received nothing but contempt. "I have come to make absolutely sure that you are aware of the consequences of your actions," I said in a calm voice as I walked by her before she could stop me. She didn't say anything, she stayed quiet. Her face looked like it was a mix of confusion and anger, and I could tell she was trying to figure out what I was talking about. "I don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about," she said as she tried to close the door behind her. But I stood in front of the door and wouldn't let her leave. "Where is the money?" I asked in a calm manner. "I'm talking about the house. The debt, the style of life you have grown used to because of the things I have not done. The lies that came from them, the lack of respect that is present." For a brief minute, she changed the look on her face, but then she swiftly went back to acting the way she had been. "This is not the right time for this, Dennis. Please leave this area right away." I looked past her and went inside the house. There, I saw Michael standing in the hallway with a face that was completely blank. The last time I was here, I was filled with love and wanted to remember a family celebration. I had come here to find out the truth, and the truth would be revealed. "Michael, I am no longer willing to be your personal bank," I yelled. My voice cut through the tension in the air. "I am no longer willing to be the person who comes to your rescue when things go wrong or the person who disappears from your life when you don't need anything." "Please, Dad, this isn't a good time for this," Michael murmured, his face going scarlet. I said, "I strongly disagree with that. This is the exact moment when things will change. For the past 5 years, you have acted like I don't exist and treated me like I was just a tool to get what you wanted. Well, the money is gone, the tool is gone, and now you will pay attention to me." I took the stack of papers out of my briefcase and slammed them down on the coffee table. "This is what you've been living on," I said, running my finger over the top paper. "Statements from banks. Home loan records, transfer slips, all of the money that I have sent to you over the past 5 years. All of the money that I set aside to make sure you were comfortable while I was struggling to pay my bills. And what was I to get in return? Being turned down? The fact that you thought of me as nothing more than a cash machine for you was constantly drilled into my head." She opened her eyes and looked down at the papers she was holding. As he walked to the front of the room, his face turned absolutely white. "Father, I had no idea about any of this," he murmured. "Don't you dare lie to me," I yelled. "You knew you didn't care at all. You and Isabella both decided that I wasn't worth being in your lives unless I was giving you money. You will be held responsible for this." I stepped back to give myself time to really see how serious the situation was. The room was so quiet that it felt like the silence itself was there. Isabella stayed in the same position, with her hands tightly balled into fists at her sides. Michael, on the other hand, was shaking in a way that was hard to miss. I didn't know who he was when I looked at him then, even though I had always thought of him as my child. He had lost sight of how important his own father was to him, and he had also forgotten that his wife and her family could tell him what to do. "I was there to help you for years," I said, my voice now low. "Is this how you repay me for my kindness? By treating me like I don't matter to you and leaving me out of your life?" I raised my hand right away to stop Michael from saying anything as soon as he opened his mouth. I answered, "No. I don't like to acknowledge it, but I've heard your justifications for a long time. I have put up with your lies and manipulation, but I won't do it again. I will never use you again. Don't ever expect me to pay for the way you live. You will address your problems like adults do, just like I did after Maria died." Finally, Isabella exclaimed in a voice that shook with anger, "Dennis, you are causing a scene. You don't have the right to come in here and do this." "I have the right to do so," I said in a calm voice. "I am the one who has made the sacrifices for you. I am the one who has been treated like I don't matter. Now is the time to reveal the truth. I won't pay for your mistakes anymore," I said. I looked around to see if Michael was nearby. "As long as your family treats me with disrespect, I won't give them any more money. The things you made up about my life and possessions don't belong to me anymore. You'll have to find another way to meet your needs." "Please, Dad, don't do this," she implored, and I could see how forlorn she was. "We need you, that's why we called you. We can't make the payments without your help." I shook my head from side to side. "I don't care about it anymore. You decide what's best for you. You will go live with them now." Michael's voice was the only thing that could be heard in the quiet room. After a short pause, he whispered an apology. "I should have done something to stop this from getting worse." His apology didn't seem to come from a place of real regret. It didn't matter at this point. The damage that had already been done was permanent, there was no going back. "I wasn't here to get you to say sorry, I was here to make sure they knew that their actions would have consequences." I looked across at Isabella. She hadn't spoken a word for most of the conversation. "You've always treated me like I was less than you," I remarked. "You have never cared about me. But you need to face the facts of the situation. You have used my services, and now you need to find a way to live without me." Her eyes were full of disbelief and wrath, and she stayed like way. She didn't say anything in response to Isabella's silence. But I still had one more thing to say. I kept going, keeping my voice steady. "I bought this house with every drop of blood, every bead of sweat, and every tear I have shed. Every penny I gave to you and every sacrifice I made went into this place. But you have never seen it for what it is. You have always seen it as your right, something you are entitled to. Okay, I know it's not yours anymore. It's time for you to face the consequences of your greed." As I left the room, I could feel the weight of the situation on my shoulders. I knew in my heart that leaving things as they were was not a good idea. I had finally spoken up and asserted myself. When I shut the door behind me, I felt like I had taken back control of my own life, and I knew that I had done more than just tell the truth. Michael kept calling me to apologize, but I didn't want to hear any more of them. He had 5 years to make things right, but he chose to stay away from me. At this point, he would have to face the consequences of his actions. The message came in a short time later, though. Everything changed all at once when the text came in. Michael had received the papers that proved this, and foreclosure proceedings had started against him. The house they thought was safe, the one I had paid for, was now in danger. I remember sitting back in my chair and staring at the writing. I knew how ironic it was that they were going to throw away everything I had given them. The house, the money, and all the things they had built on a foundation of my sacrifices were all going to be wasted. I couldn't feel sorry for them, even though what I was doing was unpleasant. They had to deal with the consequences of what they did. After that, I was no longer a member of that community. The next day, Michael came to see me. He looked completely worn out, and his eyes were bloodshot from not getting enough sleep. "Father, we need to talk," he said, his voice breaking. "Please," I said, "I can't fix this on my own." I kept looking at him for a long time, and then I got up from my chair and walked to the kitchen counter. All of the fury I had been feeling had gone away. I was feeling calm, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm not going to repair this for you," I stated in a low voice. "You are the one who is accountable for this situation right now. You made your own choices, and now you have to live with the results." He stood there for a short time, allowing the weight of what he had lost sink in. He looked at me and murmured, "I'm sorry, Dad," and I could see how ashamed he was. "I want you to think long and hard before you discard me," I stated in a calm voice. "I will no longer be your safety net." I was tired of being the person you called when things went wrong, so I watched him walk away, knowing that this time there was no coming back. I took charge of my life again. For the first time in years, I felt free. The next few days were calm, and the quiet didn't bother me anymore. It was a wonderful moment of quiet and serenity, the kind that happens when you finally realize that you have made the greatest option for yourself. I spent the following few weeks alone, thinking about all that had happened over the years. I had dedicated my life to being the one who took care of them, the one who fixed things for them, and the one who gave up everything so that they may have the life they had always wanted. I gave all my worldly goods to Michael and Isabella, and now that I had done that, it was time for me to start living my own life. The first few days after Michael left were the worst for me. He had come to me in a condition of desperation and despair, but the truth was that it was too late to change what had already happened. It didn't matter if I had forgiven him for whatever it was a long time ago, things could never go back to the way they were before. I had to face that hard truth with bravery. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not anymore. He couldn't go back to being the dad who was always just out of reach, living in the shadows of their life and only being a source of money and support. After a few weeks without hearing from Michael, I got another communication from him. First, he left a message on the phone saying he was sorry. Then he called again, this time with even better reasons. But that was no longer possible. I had previously heard all of those things before that. The promises, the shame, and the words that didn't mean anything because nothing real had changed. They would take, and I would give, that was how things were with us. Even though they would, I would never forget. But now, that's not the case anymore. I got out of my bindings. After that, the letter came. Early on Tuesday morning, I got it in the mail. After it was sent to me, I signed for it with a steady hand. When I opened the letter, I was surprised by how serious the contents were. I thought that notice of default would have a less effect than it did. That letter was the one I had been looking for. It would decide what their future would be like. Final demand for payment was the title of the notice. The house that Michael and Isabella had bought with my help, which they thought was in good shape, was now on the verge of being foreclosed on. Because they hadn't kept up with their payments, they were now feeling the full effects of the choices they had made in the past. I set the letter aside and thought for a while about whether or not it was true. Even though I knew this day would come, I still felt fulfilled, which was a different feeling than I had imagined. I reached all of my goals, but now I feel empty. I did everything I could to make sure they knew what would happen if they did what they did, but it didn't make me as happy as I thought it would. It tasted unpleasant in my mouth, or more accurately, it left a nasty taste in my tongue. In this case, it didn't matter if you won or lost. Finally, I had to stand up for myself and say, I've had enough. I was sitting at the kitchen table and looking at the letter I had just gotten when the phone rang. I could tell who was calling without glancing at the caller ID. I knew who the person was. This time, it was Michael who called again, and his voice sounded different, more broken and forlorn than before. He no longer called people to say he was sorry. He called to ask for help. "Please, Dad," he begged, his voice shaking as he spoke. "I don't know what to do. We could lose everything, including the house and everything inside it. I need you." I could tell how scared he was, and his voice was full of fear. After everything they had done to me, there was no way I was going to let them get away with it any longer. After all those years of being ignored, thrown away, and used, I had no more sympathy. "You should have thought about this before you made a choice," I said in a calm voice. "Michael, you had everything you could want in terms of material things. You had money, a place to live, and people who cared about you. But you choose to turn your back on me. You opted instead to make me a walking ATM. It's finally time for you to deal with the results of the decisions you've made." There was a long pause in the conversation, and the only sound that could be heard was his breathing. "I'm sorry, Father," he said in a low voice. "I was wrong. I didn't know what I was doing until it was too late to change it." I let out a sigh while I held the phone tightly in my fingers. "Michael, it's too late for you to say you're sorry. You've made your choice, and now you have to deal with it." I could hear him crying on the other end of the telephone, but I didn't think it was essential to comfort him. He had made up his mind about the path he wanted to take in life, and now he was going down that path alone. "Please, Dad," he begged again, his voice so low that it was hard to hear. "Please help us. I beg you." I stepped to the window and stood there, looking out at the quiet street. The world looked a lot smaller than it used to. The house I helped them buy, which at the time appeared perfect, had become a symbol of all the problems that had happened since then. I was in charge of all of them, yet they made everything a joke. But at that point, the game was already over. I said with conviction, "I cannot help you. You will have to work this out on your own, I will not be able to help you." Michael said, "I understand, Father," after breaking the silence on the other end of the line, but this time his voice was so faint that it was impossible to tell what he was saying. "I'm not sure at all how to fix this. I don't know how to fix things." I said in a whisper, "You can't fix this. But you can learn something from it. You can learn to respect those who care about you. You might learn not to get too comfortable with anything. But you'll have to do all the job by yourself." After then, I gave the phone back to its owner and went to the fireplace. At that point, the extreme anger I had been feeling had completely gone away. I had no energy left at all. I'm sick of the games, tired of the lies, and tired of being the only one who always gave but never got anything back. But more than anything else, I felt a peculiar sense of peace. I wasn't involved in their fight for the first time in a long time. The things they thought would happen didn't hold me back at all. I wasn't being held as a prisoner. The days that followed were a blur of thinking that went by too quickly. I didn't try to get in touch with Michael again, and he didn't get back to me either. After that, no one had anything more to say. There was no way to go back to a period before the damage had been done. I had made up my mind, and they had made up theirs too. Things didn't alter after that event, life went on as it had before. That is, until the phone rang again one day. This time, Michael wasn't to blame for what happened. Isabella was the individual in question. "Dennis," she murmured in a strained voice. "We need to talk to each other right away." Even though I was feeling a little unhappy, I stayed calm and communicated clearly. "Isabella, what is it?" Isabella said, for a little while, she couldn't make up her mind. "I know things haven't been perfect. I know I've said things I shouldn't have. Michael is making things harder for me, though. We need to leave the house because the bank is warning us that it may go through with the foreclosure. We need your help. I could hear the urgency in her voice, but I didn't think it was necessary to do what she asked. I had already made up my mind before that point. I said, Isabella, I'm sorry about that. On the other hand, I'm not going to help you because you've taken everything I had to offer. Now you have to deal with the results of the choices you made. Dennis, please, she begged through her tears as she began to speak. We have lost everything we own. We don't know what to do next. I told them again, I can't help you. You made up your mind about what you wanted to do. You used me, and now you have to deal with the consequences. I ended the call and stepped back to my seat. Finally, I could think clearly, which I hadn't been able to do for a long time. I had made the right choice. I had stood up for myself and decided that I would no longer let them control me. I had gotten my freedom back, and no one could take it away from me. The house, the money, and all of the other things they had taken from me didn't matter to me anymore. The most important thing was that I had finally taken back control of my life after a long time. For the weeks that followed, there was a pause in activity. Even though Michael and Isabella continued their argument, I took a step back and chose not to become involved in the situation. They had to figure out how to solve the problem on their own. While I was sitting in my living room, taking in the peacefulness that had surrounded me, I became aware of something. The real cost was neither the residence or the monetary payment. The cost that I had to pay in real terms was the number of years that I had spent living for them rather than living for myself. At that point in time, I was living my life for myself alone. Everything else was irrelevant in comparison. I arrived to the conclusion that the most important lesson I had learned had nothing to do with money, property, or sacrifices after the dust had fallen. Instead, it was about having respect for yourself and setting limitations for yourself. For many years, I had the belief that my worth was based on the contributions that I could make to the world. In actuality, however, real family is not based on what you give to others, rather, it is based on the love, respect, and gratitude that you should always show to others. When I think about what lies ahead, there is one thing that I am very convinced of: I am not going to allow anybody take advantage of me ever again. I will always strive for my own well-being, no matter whether I had to abandon those individuals I thought I would never have to abandon. Please remember to give this video a like if you feel moved by this narrative, and to share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing it. Furthermore, if you have not already done so, make certain that you select the subscribe option and activate notifications so that you never again fail to read any of our new content. I greatly appreciate your support, and I would be delighted to hear your thoughts in the comments part that is located below. Let me know your whereabouts immediately as soon as you start observing, as well as your thoughts on the conclusions that were reached in this story. You should always remember that you have to fight for yourself. Your worth is based on who you are, not how much you give up. I hope to see you again in a video soon, and I wish you all the best.